What would drive a young woman, barely more than a teenager, to willingly embrace death rather than betray her faith? In the bustling city of Antioch, where Roman power clashed with the rising faith of Christianity, a young virgin named Pelagia made a choice so radical, so unthinkable, that her story has echoed through the centuries. This is the life and the martyrdom of Saint Pelagia of Antioch, a story of purity, defiance, and an unshakable devotion to Christ. Antioch was one of the greatest cities of the Roman Empire, cosmopolitan, wealthy, and politically powerful. But it was also a place of deep tension, where Christians lived under the shadow of persecution. In this turbulent world, Pelagia, a young maiden of noble family, became a symbol of courage and faith. Pelagia was born into a wealthy household in Antioch. Tradition tells us she was remarkably beautiful, admired not only for her appearance, but also for her modesty and deep devotion to God. Unlike many of her peers, she chose a path of chastity, dedicating herself as a bride of Christ. But her beauty did not go unnoticed. The Roman governor, struck by her appearance, sought to take her as his wife. For Pelagia, this was not simply a marriage proposal. It was a threat to her very soul. Rome demanded loyalty, not only in civic life, but also in religion. To refuse the governor's will was not just defiance of a man, but of imperial authority. When Pelagia rejected his advances, declaring she was already betrothed to Christ, she placed herself directly in the line of persecution. According to early sources, the governor threatened her with torture, humiliation, and execution. Yet Pelagia did not waver. Her faith was stronger than fear. Faced with the horror of dishonor, Pelagia made her final choice. Rather than submit to the governor and betray her consecration to God, she leapt from a rooftop, offering her life freely to Christ. To some, this act seemed like despair. But to the early Christians, Pelagia's death was an act of ultimate courage, a martyrdom of purity. She chose death over sin, sacrifice over compromise. The Church remembered her not as a victim of shame, but as a victor of faith. Saint Pelagia's story spread quickly throughout the Christian world. In the East, she was revered as the Virgin Martyr of Antioch. Hymns were composed in her honor, and her feast day, October 8th, became a day of remembrance for her courage. Her life inspired not only women, but the entire Church, teaching that true purity of heart and loyalty to Christ were worth more than life itself. Theologians such as St. John Chrysostom praised her memory, holding her up as an example of steadfastness in the face of temptation and persecution. Saint Pelagia reminds us that true freedom does not come from power, wealth, or even survival, but from the courage to remain faithful, no matter the cost. Her story may be from the 4th century, but its message speaks just as loudly today. When the world pressures us to compromise our convictions, will we have the courage to stand firm? This is the enduring question left to us by Pelagia of Antioch, virgin, martyr, and bride of Christ. Saint Pelagia of Antioch, pray for us.
He was one of the most brilliant minds of the 19th century, a man who shook the foundations of England's religious establishment. First hailed as a champion of Anglicanism, then branded a traitor when he embraced Rome. His writings shaped theology, inspired faith, and paved the way for the Second Vatican Council. And today, he is venerated as a saint. This is the story of John Henry Newman, the restless heart that sought only the truth. John Henry Newman was born in London on February 21, 1801, the eldest of 6 children in a middle-class family. From his youth, Newman was deeply introspective, fascinated by questions of faith, eternity, and the soul. At just 15, he experienced what he later called his first conversion, a profound sense of God's presence, rooted in the evangelical Protestant tradition. This moment would set the tone for the rest of his life, an endless pursuit of truth. By 1817, he entered Trinity College, Oxford. Soon his brilliance was undeniable. In 1822, he was elected a Fellow of Oriel College, an achievement reserved for the most promising minds. Oxford was not merely an academic home, it was a crucible where faith and reason clashed, and Newman stood at the center. By the 1830s, Newman had become a rising star in the Church of England, but he was restless. He saw the Church drifting, becoming too liberal, too entangled with politics. In 1833, his friend John Cable preached a sermon known as the National Apostasy Sermon, sparking what became the Oxford movement. Along with Cable and Edward Pusey, Newman called Anglicans back to the early Church Fathers, apostolic tradition, and sacramental life. Newman's Tracts for the Times, pamphlets defending ancient Christian doctrine, caused a storm. His words were sharp, persuasive, and deeply unsettling to the Anglican establishment. He argued that the Church of England was not merely a Protestant body, but part of the one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church. But where did that lead? To Rome. In the 1840s, Newman's writings pushed him into crisis. He wrestled with authority. Was truth safeguarded by private interpretation or by the historic Church? His studies of the early Fathers convinced him the Catholic Church was the true continuation of the Apostles. But conversion carried a price. To become Catholic in Victorian England was to risk your career, reputation, even friendships. Anti-Catholic prejudice ran deep. On October 9, 1845, at a small chapel in Littlemore, Newman made his decision. He was received into the Catholic Church by Blessed Dominic Barberi, an Italian missionary. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Many saw him as a traitor to England. Former friends abandoned him, yet Newman was at peace. He had found the truth. After his conversion, Newman was ordained a Catholic priest and founded the Birmingham Oratory, a community modeled on St. Philip Neri. The early years were hard. Suspicion followed him, and he faced public ridicule. But his pen became his defense. In 1864, attacked by novelist Charles Kingsley, Newman responded with Apologia pro vita sua, a masterpiece of English prose explaining his journey of faith. Other works followed: The Idea of a University, defending liberal education, and The Grammar of Assent, exploring how we come to belief. His writings were not just theological, they spoke to the human soul, uniting faith with reason, intellect with devotion. In 1879, Pope Leo XIII recognized his contributions by making him a cardinal without ever being a bishop. Newman's motto was simple yet profound: Cor ad cor loquitur. Heart speaks to heart. When he died in 1890, at the age of 89, thousands mourned, but his influence lived on. His thought would inspire the Second Vatican Council, especially on conscience and the role of the laity. In 2010, Pope Benedict XVI beatified him in England, and in 2019, Pope Francis canonized him as St. John Henry Newman. St. John Henry Newman reminds us that faith is not static, it is a pilgrimage. He shows us the courage to follow truth wherever it leads, even when it costs everything. From Oxford scholar to Catholic cardinal, from suspicion to sainthood, his life is a witness to integrity, intellect, and holiness. Perhaps his words say it best: God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. I have my mission, and so do we. This was the life of St. John Henry Newman.